Hey, Shepard family. This is Pastor Scott Seidler with another episode of our Shepard podcast. Sometimes our podcasts feature folks that move ministry forward. Sometimes, like today, our Shepard podcast is built on faith stories and enjoying how God has worked in the lives of people like you and I in the course of their everyday living. Today, I am thrilled to have Scott Spiezio, a two-time World Series champion for the Anaheim Angels and my beloved St. Louis Cardinals, who through an incredible 12-year Major League career has literally seen the world. And he happens to be a friend of mine from my days growing up in the Northern Illinois prairie and cornfields of Northern Illinois. And in this two-part podcast, we want to celebrate what it means to have a home like that, and what home means for us, especially as we grow up and step out in faith into God's great big world. And at the same time, how home grounds us and helps us make through the darkest days that human beings can walk through, which happens to all of us. So Scott, welcome. So great to have you. And tell me what's happening back in our beloved town of Morris, Illinois these days.
Hey, Scott. Hey, thanks for having me on. There's not much going on here in Morris, especially with the COVID stuff. But
Yep.
it's just great being back here with my friends and family, my good friends, my rooted friends.
Right. I bet the corn is growing for sure. And so you can always watch the corn grow all around Morris. Morris was a little town that, I grew up and I suffer from ADHD. I don't know if I really actually want to say I suffer from it. But by the time my parents started raising me as their sixth child, they basically knew that the cornfields and the Illinois River was going to corral me in. And it was just, have a free-for-all. I'm assuming that for you and your sisters, it was the same in the Spiezio household.
Oh, yeah. I was constantly running in the cornfields. There's a creek running through the golf course here I grew up on, and it's called the Nettle Creek. I still live on it today. I just kayaked it the other day, and, we lived in that thing. You and I went out and golfed that many times.
Oh yeah, and I tell you, with Elmer Girani, one of our friends who lived up in your neighborhood there, we'd go out in the middle of the night and go hawking golf balls out of the creek and come back with 600, 1,000 golf balls. I remember one night. Crazy place to live. Well, hey Scott, you've had, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I counted that you have played for 4 major league teams, which means you've moved around quite a lot. And then you throw in spring training and road games. You've slept in a lot of different rooms in your lifetime. Just talk about that experience of that much movement, that many places to call home after growing up in such a stable place like Morris, Illinois, the Mayberry RFD of Northern Illinois.
Yeah, it was difficult. I never even got on a plane until LSU, Louisiana State University, recruited me. I think it was the winter before my last season, my senior year of playing. That was the first time I ever was on a plane. I think I'd been to Disney World a couple times, but we drove when I was younger. And then I went to the University of Illinois. So it was, an hour drive down 47 from here. Right. So I had a little bit of traveling with college baseball, but once I got into the minor leagues, I signed in '93 with the Oakland A's, and man, it was just bus ride after bus ride, for 3.5 years, with a couple flights in there once you got to AAA. And then the major leagues, I figured it out one time. I think with the Angels, we played counting the through the World Series and the playoffs, in spring training, we had 220 games in 250 days or something like that. It's crazy. So you're constantly on the move. You're going into a city. Sometimes you have as many as 20 game road trip. You're going to a city for 3 days, going to another city for 4 days. So it's really tough. I'd bring a fan. I always like the fan and a pillow, because I like my own pillow and fan.
Right. How did you create a sense of home? I mean, you've got your teammates who become, your extended family. So, how does that all work? I often wonder, like, I know you're rooted in Morris. I'm assuming you've got like at least an apartment in Anaheim or St. Louis or Seattle. But how do you create a sense of home when you're not home?
It's really tough. And especially because you don't get to pick your own friends,
Right.
so you really have to search out, with teams. I grew up Catholic in my hometown here. My dad was Roman, pretty strict Roman Catholic. We had to go to church every day. When people say they were drugged, I was drugged as a child, drugged to church every day. But
you're not talking about actually being fed narcotics. You're actually, no, they dragged you to church, just to be clear.
Physically dragged. Yeah. But just a little play on words.
Yep. Love it.
So going from there in college, it was hard to get to church, especially on the road, and they'd have baseball chapel, it was great. So baseball chapel, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and baseball chapel became big in my life, and as you went from team to team, you'd have, sometimes it would be just me, where you felt isolated and alone spiritually. When I got to like Anaheim, I found a great bunch of guys, a rock solid Christian group. And that really helped me excel and feel like I had, a home base around me. Growing up, we go to CCD and, that's every Wednesday. It's a class for younger kids. And then, we'd have team groups that would get together, and we'd have all denominations included in that here because it's such a small town.
Right.
And I had, I went to a small school, Nettle Creek School. I don't know if you remember that, but we had a big class. We had 10 people in my class, 5 boys and 5 girls. And the class ahead of us had 4, and the class below us had 3. So, having that kind of a group was just, it was incredible while I was here. But when you leave, like I said, you can't pick the same friends. You don't know everybody's background. You've got people from different countries, and it's quite hard. The biggest thing is finding a church if you don't have a baseball chapel. We had pastors that would be on beck and call for us whenever we wanted to. They'd be there, and just some great individuals, and try to find those people that can hold you accountable. That's right. the hardest thing.
The vivid image that I have in my head is your dad carrying a bucket of balls and you walking behind him, because everybody knew, your dad was a Major League Baseball player as well. He was pouring his life into you. But those rhythms, both of learning baseball, but even as you share the rhythms of, going to church, the regularity of our experiences as we grow up, that makes us who we are. I'm thinking now of I think it's the Zac Brown Band with Homegrown, this country song, this is who we are. What are the things that you miss most, or that you missed most about Morris, about growing up in this hometown as you were on the road? What were some of the things that your heart wished for? And certainly, I've got my list of the top 5, but what are yours, Scott?
I just think the simplicity of it, I don't want that to sound bad, but just that, you didn't have to deal with crazy traffic, with, in my case, fans, were, sometimes they could get out of control, and, dealing with the traffic, getting to the park, signing autographs, which is I like it, but sometimes it just becomes overwhelming. And now it's, that I'm back, and before, it's just nice to, when you get home, you're home, and when you go to the store, everybody knows you as Scott, not as something different,
Exactly.
Everybody treats me I'm not a star here at all, and
Right.
I like that. I really like that. But
Yep.
the biggest thing is, friends and family. There's a certain thing about the people you grow up with that you just have a connection with that's really hard to duplicate. And
Yep.
I'll get into it later with you, but there's just some people that they're always there for you. They're not looking for anything from you, and that's a special place. At Cornfest too. I can't leave out Cornfest.
That's my number one, Corn Fest.
Yeah. That's right.
Corn
Yeah.
Festival is the yearly celebration of Grundy County being the greatest corn producing per capita, some ungodly statistic from the 1950s, county in the world. And we just get together for a big week long really party. And it is the highlight of the whole year. So in Morris.
Yeah, there's a lot of people here that make most of their money during that week and weekend. So it's and now I am actually a corn farmer. I don't actually do it, but I own the land, and when
that's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's part of your resume.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Hey, did I go ahead, finish up.
This year it's soybeans though, so we had to rotate the crop. So
you got to rotate. It's a simple agricultural accent. Yeah. You got to rotate the crop, Scott. For goodness sake.
Exactly.
Did I ever tell you my brother Ken, who he touches anything and it turns to gold. He can't not make money. My brother Ken came to the conclusion with the Corn Festival that why is no one selling corn at the Corn Festival? And honest to God, he decided, you know what? I'm going to buy like 10,000. This is a true story. 10,000 ears of corn and sell them for like $3 a piece. And he made like $20,000-$30,000 with corn and pop in a single corn festival. Next year, he came back and he started selling spuds. And that was his brilliant idea. Like, how long does it take to cook a potato? Well, then he starts selling spuds at the corn festival. And and my brothers and sisters and I are looking and we're like, Kenneth, unbelievable. It is a great thing. And you're right. Simplicity is everything. When's the last time, by the way, you've been to Morris Bakery? Recently?
Oh, yeah. Recently. Yeah. So
best donuts.
My friend was trying to pick me up some, and she went to there twice at 7 a.m. and they were already sold out. That's how crazy it is. You got to get there quick or order them in advance. The potato rolls too.
Oh, potato rolls are so good. So good.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to get back to some real serious conversation. I'm sorry. Scott, the only reason I'm having you on this podcast is so that I can have a nostalgic moment with someone who's closer to Morris right now than I am. But I do want to talk about faith. And so your dad, let's just talk about your dad for just a little bit. Your dad, Ed, was a major league player himself. I remember one time, I saw you carrying the balls into the field. Your practice work ethic was something. Your dad was something. How did he help you learn the game? Because, again, when you're learning the game, and I want to just take a step back for a second. In our Lutheran denomination, we talk about this thing called vocation. Vocation has to do with the callings in life that God places on us. And those callings are multiple, and they go into a million different directions. And one calling in life is, in some ways, an entertainer, right? And baseball is entertainment. But your dad showed you the game. He taught you. He passed on, as a master craftsman, his vocation to you. So talk just a little bit about not just the technical side of learning baseball from your dad, but also the spiritual side of learning a vocation like that, and then going out and living it. And now you've got children yourself, who at least I know one son playing football in college is, learning that professional kind of high level of competition vocation from you. Just talk a little bit about that transfer of knowledge and vocation from dad to you and now to your kids.
No, how long do you got? He, first of all, my dad is God is first in his life, and that's evident to everybody around him. he's always said, you know, you've got to know Jesus, you know him, just not know about him, but know him.
Yeah.
And you know, he really stressed that in my life. As far as work ethic, my dad, you know, he was taught by his dad, who was a incredibly gifted athlete. Ended up losing his leg in a horrible accident, falling off a smokestack 4.5 stories when my dad was only 15 years old. So my dad had to become a man pretty quick. He lived, but he lost his leg, and he lost, you know, he loved every sport, but he always pushed my dad to work hard. So when my dad had me, at the end of his career, I was born September of 72. He was finished with the White Sox in September of 72. So I was lucky in a way to have him as a living coach. And, you know, so he knew if I wanted it, that he could provide me the way to get there. And that's what he said. He said, if you want it, I'll help you get there. But you know, you're either gonna be a valedictorian or you're gonna be a Major League Baseball player. You know, pick which one you want to be. And I said, that's awesome. My sisters, they decided to be valedictorians. You know, I decided to be a baseball player. And you know, he said it's not something that happens overnight. You know, you have to put the time and work in. And I love the game. I remember at 6 years old begging. I'm like, come on, Dad, let me play T-ball. He's like, no, you're not ready yet, you know. And at 7, he finally let me play. And it was just like he unleashed a lion out of the cage. And I loved it. But we practiced. We started in my front yard, and he would throw me tennis balls every day. And as I got older, I started hitting them across the neighbors. I don't know if you remember Dr. Meningo, but his yard was over. He was over on the other side. I started hitting his house. So we went to the backyard. I had 2 pitching mounds in the backyard, one for closer so he could develop my bat speed, one a little bit longer so he could throw me change-ups, curveballs, everything. And I was a switch hitter. He made me a switch hitter so that, you know, when he was playing, he got platooned. You know, he came up in 64, right after leaving Lewis College. He left Lewis in 63. By 64, he was in the World Series facing the Yankees. And then, you know, there's only 16 teams at that time. Now, you know, now there's 30. And so for him to break through, you know, that team went on to win 67 World Series. 68, they lost in Game 7. And he went on to the Padres, hit the first home run, first RBI, first hit Padre history in 1969. And, you know, then was traded to the White Sox. But so he got platooned, and he was stuck behind, you know, he played third base and was stuck behind Ken Boyer, who was the MVP of the league. So he made me a switch hitter. He had me learn every position so that I, you know, if I got stuck behind a Hall of Famer or MVP type player, I could move. And but that took a lot of work. You know, we had to hit from both sides of the plate every day. I had stations in my basement during the winter. We'd go to the high school and use the facility there early in the morning. It was an every single day thing. You know, ground balls at the high school park or whatever park we could find. You know, sometimes in John Mackinson, he would take care of the fields, and he'd chase us off all the time because he'd just drag the field. And we'd show up, and I'm taking ground balls at third, then at second, and then at short and first, and then he'd hit me fly balls, and we worked on strength of my arm. So it was an everyday thing, and it was also my dad was really into the mental side of the game, and you know, we had subliminal tapes that I would play, you know, that gave me positive affirmations as I went to bed. He was really into visualization. You know, he'd always talk about. Yeah, how the subconscious, you know, mind can't tell the difference between a real or imagined image. So I would visualize my at-bats before I went up to the plate and have success. And I used that all the way through. Even those tapes, I would bring them through into college, through the minor leagues, and into the big leagues. And then I started getting into to where I hired some sports hypnotherapists that I work with quite a bit, and hopefully I'll write a book about that soon. I'm in the works with it. Yeah, but people think that it was only physical, but the mental side is the really hard side to work with. And if you listen to Yogi Berra, the game's 90% mental, the other 50% is physical. His math's a little off, but that's Yogi Berra, So yeah, awesome. It was really hard as far as working out. I remember Walter Payton. You remember Walter Payton? He had his Walter Payton run. So I go out to the golf course and run up the hills in the golf course, and then there was a sand pit on Old Stage Road here in Morris, and I'd have a railroad tie like Vision Quest and run up the sand hills and run down, trying to extend my stride length. Yeah. But as far as tying that in with spiritual, I was a big believer in prayer, and so on my headboard I had goals for that coming season, and I'd write them down before the season started, and every day I'd pray, pray for my family and friends. And then I, pray for the strength to help me become a better player, and to accomplish my goals. And I always, and if for some reason I fell asleep too early and I woke up and I didn't pray, I'd be like, oh no, I forgot, and that carried on through my whole career. Even in the dark times, I still, was a prayer warrior, even as much as between pitches. I'd always with me, but I'd always say, just be with me, God, and it's amazing that, when you have a role model like that, like my dad, that, it carries on, and it's not a perfect shield, like in my case, but at least, it gave me roots to go back to, and find myself again once I hit some dark places. That's the thing I remember most, is spending the time with my dad. I remember at the end of every session, he'd go, okay, it's a game situation. It's, game 7 of the World Series, bases loaded, you're down 1 run, 3-2 count, 2 outs. What are you going to do? And my mom would be shagging balls, and she'd be like, do it for the ring, Scott, and so later on, as I got to the World Series, and I felt like I had already been there a million times, and when I hit a game 6 home run in the World Series in 2002 for my 19th RBI, it was just a feeling of, wow, all that work that I put in with my dad in the backyard came to fruition, and then I got to share it with them all. Yeah, share it with them all, and then later in 2006, he got to present me the ring. We're the only father-son that has ever won with the same organization, your beloved Cardinals, and wow. We both wore 26. Good. So it was an amazing thing, and now to be able to share time with my son, even though it's not my sport, I still get out there after we throw him some passes. He'll run some routes, and then we usually play about 7 games a pig on the basketball hoop. So nice. It's really fun, and my other son, he's into music, and I told him if he wants to be a good drummer, he's got to practice, and he's been practicing like crazy. I mean, blisters on his hands, and he's going to University of Illinois next year, and my daughter is picked the books route. They're all very smart, but she's got a 5.6 out of 4 so far going into her junior year. So I'm really proud of all of them.
I love it. And you, hey, by the way, is Sandfrog, am I right on that? Is that your band?
That is my band, Sandfrog. Yep. It's on Spotify.
Okay, everybody. For those of you listening, go to Spotify and look up Sandfrog, and you'll see Heavy Metal Scott.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's it was, the thing about Sandfrog is, I liked like rock music for working out and stuff when I got into college, and that just kind of followed me. And when I got to the big leagues, I liked music. My dad, had perfect pitch. He could like hear a note and write it down. He was incredible. And he played the accordion. And he could play the piano as well.
What?
Yeah.
Your dad plays the accordion?
Yeah, well, he did. He doesn't really
things I don't know.
Yeah, but yeah. So when I got to the big leagues, one of the things in order to not like go out, because in baseball, a lot of people, you get done with the game, you're all hyped up, and a lot of guys, go drink, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go out, so I bought a guitar and I brought it with me on all the road trips, and I learned power chords because they were the easiest thing to learn, and
yes,
and drop beat tuning, and I just started writing riffs, and I started writing lyrics, and and all my lyrics at the beginning were all about Christian thoughts or behavior that I was thinking, or things that I saw other teammates doing that I didn't think was great, and it was almost like I was kind of warning myself, to stay in the Word, and it's and still a lot of my lyrics are like that. There's a song called "Save Yourself" where God's kind of talking, to you, saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm trying to save you, but you're lying to me. I'm here, can't you see? I'm here to save you."
Yeah.
And then there's another song called "Past You" about running from your past and things like that. So there's a lot of lyrics that ring home from before and after the dark little. Well, it was more than a little, but it's the dark spot that I hit.
No, it's great. And, Scott, I'm just so grateful, first of all, just to catch up. I mean, learning more parts of the story from your life, it is amazing. There's such a richness to what it was growing up with all of our friends in Morris in the 1980s. And I'm just so grateful to catch up with you. I'm really excited also just to celebrate the way in which God moves a life forward. And every one of us, every one of us has a story, and sometimes the darkness comes later. Sometimes the darkness is early on in our childhood. But the confidence is that through both dark days and not so dark days, God's the one who's the faithful companion, who's helping us and trying to help us and reach through the darkness to help us along. We're going to take a short break, and after we come back, we're going to pick up a little bit more of the texture of this story, and especially about the challenges that you confronted at the height of your success in baseball, and how God brought you through to break you and to bring you back to Himself, and also to get you back to a place where you're back home. And I think I speak for all of us who've known you and have heard little bits and snippets of your story. You grow up in Morris, and you're always fast friends, and we're all so glad that you're home. Whether or not you stay in Morris growing soybeans, that's really beside the point, but that you found a place to get back to where your heart is, and when your heart can be well tended and cared for, that's just a great thing, and I'm so excited about it. I'm going to catch you on the other side of this break, and then we'll pick up the story and go a little bit longer. Hey, this is Pastor Scott Seidler with another installment of our Shepard podcast, coming back after a break and thanking Scott Spiezio for joining me today for this installment. We've been talking about home and how it grounds us, and especially grounds us for life when we are living it in different places and spaces of this world. Through your time away, Scott, you walked through some pretty dark days, and that's part of the story that you're living and telling about now in these days after your baseball career professionally as a player has come to an end. But what were some of those challenges that you faced? What were some of the demons that you encountered as you moved around this planet far from home?
Oh boy, being in the major leagues, especially in Southern California, there was temptation all around you. But I did have that core group of guys, Tim Salmon, David Exton, Garrett Anderson, Orlando Palmero, Chuck Obremski was our chapel leader. He's since passed, but there was more guys than that, and we had just a tight knit bunch of guys that we'd have Bible studies during the week, before games, on the road, because we all knew that temptation was there, and that's why I started to play music and stuff. There's with baseball, there's alcohol, there's amphetamines, there's all sorts of things that players were doing, and it was kind of like second nature. It was just part of baseball. And also, women, they follow you around, they know where you stay. It was hard. When I left Anaheim after the 2002 World Series and then had another great year in 2003, I went to Seattle, and I lost that base, and that base of Christian guys. When I didn't really want to leave Anaheim. It was a situation where they were going to move Erstad to first, and I was going to lose playing time. They were going to cut my salary in half, and it was just a tough time for me. But I went in there, and during spring training, I got hurt really bad. I blew out my thoracic disc 6 and 7. And they were telling me, this was 2 weeks ago in spring training, my first year there. I just signed a 3-year deal with them, with a 4th-year option. And, it was my first long-term contract. I'd always played to get to the major leagues and to stay there, and of course to win World Series, because I wanted a ring like my dad. So I'd done that. So the next thing I played for was a long-term contract, and I get it. And then all of a sudden I get hurt, and they're telling me, but you might not, if you try to play, you might not walk again, and you're probably not going to play again. And I just this overwhelming, I didn't have all those guys to go, the chapel leader that I'd known for 4 years, all these guys that I could lean on. I didn't have that. And I just started feeling sorry for myself. And, I had all this time on my hands, and, and then I'm thinking, I better go out and hang out with these guys, try to get some friendships. And we're on the road, and I went out with these guys and started drinking, and, and I did that for a few nights. Now, in the past, I'd play music, read the Bible. During the World Series, I read the Bible for like an hour, 2 hours after every game through the playoffs, even late into the night. And my dad even said, you should get some rest. And I said, if God's going to punish me for reading his word, then I'll take my chances.
Love that.
So it was really a hard time for me. And, with that, consistency of darkness, I started making bad choices. And, one thing led to another. I ended up getting divorced. From there, I ended up getting remarried to somebody I shouldn't have been remarried to. It was kind of like one of those situations, the temptress with the honey dripping from her lips. And, I turned into, it was almost like a selfish, like, poor me. I've worked so hard to get here. Now all of a sudden I'm getting this taken away from me. I never even got to have fun. How am I'm not going to hold my kids anymore. And it was like I was lashing out. And instead of at that point returning to the word and, the armor and the shield, I didn't. I kept running with it. And the more bad decisions I made, the easier it was for me to make more bad decisions.
Right.
And, my dad really, and my whole family, all my family is faith driven. And, they were trying to get me to see the light, come back. And, my dad gave me a book. It was called, When the Enemy Strikes. And at the time I didn't really want to read it. I wish I would have read it right then. I think Dr. Charles Stanley wrote it. And what I realized was that the devil he's out to pull you down, especially, with Oakland and with Anaheim, I went out to churches and talked to kids. And, I'd tell them, my story of faith. And I won the Roberto Clemente charity award for the Angels, because I was always going out and talking to kids and at schools. And same with, I won Dave Stewart charity award in Oakland. And, I guess I never really thought that he's going to come after me. But after reading that book, I see where I was just getting thrown all these things. And instead of putting on the armor, of the word, the sword, the shield, because, I'd go into a city, and I'd roll over and, grab the Bible and just open it to a page, earlier in my career, until that point. And I just, start reading, and it was like God made me open to that page, because whatever I was reading, it was really weird how that would always happen. Yep. And, when I got hurt, I got away from that, and all of a sudden my armor came off, and it was just one bad decision after another. Eventually I went to the Cardinals. I was like, God was giving me a second chance, but I was still living with sin around me. And, I couldn't go through unless I was ready to let go. And I wasn't ready to let go of my second wife. And it was just a bad situation. And I decided to try, drugs with her. And that led to something, I'd never seen one before. I was, 33 and a half, late. I was never a partier. And right. Even a drinker, and all of a sudden all these things are hitting me, and I'm not in the Word, and I don't have this core group around me. And it just started leading downhill. Luckily enough, my first year I could stay, focused enough to have a great season and win the World Series in 2006. And right. And when 2007 came around, it was a tough run. And after the 2007 season, the Cardinals released me, and from then on, I started feeling ashamed, and I got further and further into drinking and addiction, and it was hard, yeah. But I never lost my faith through all of that. I even though I knew I was doing wrong, I knew that I was gonna make it through, and I prayed continuously, but it just, with that much baggage of sin around me, it was too hard to shed it. And until I focused, yeah. And like you said, coming back to Morris, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but coming back to Morris, and having, finally opening up to my old friends and families, because there was a bunch of negative people that came around when I was down and out. They wanted money, they wanted to party and drink and have fun and tell stories, rock and roll and
Bruce Springsteen glory days, right?
Yeah, exactly. And until I finally just shut out and went back to my old friends and family and neighbors, and really got focused with the local church, that I get back to myself.
Yeah, I think that's such a, the narrative you just told, and you really have to tell it in that large of a chunk, because it only makes sense that, and I've heard it, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 100, 1,000 times as a pastor. A serious life-altering circumstance occurs. It reframes the way that you are doing life. You've got time on your hands, you've got capacity, you've got financial resources, and you make one bad choice to go out drinking on that first night, and it leads to the second night, the third night, the something different on the fourth night, the further life, degradation. And it is something that it is very hard to escape. And you don't have a strategy to get into addiction, but you have to have a strategy to get out. And that, I think, is one of the hardest things for me as a pastor, is for all the conversations I've had with people whose lives have swirled down into the toilet bowl in a number of different directions or iterations. My biggest pain point personally is when they're motivated to change. They're motivated to move beyond this sad situation in which they find themselves and they don't want to be in. And yet they are either powerless or they don't have a sociology around them that is going to help them identify the strategies, support the strategies, and then implement the strategies to get them out of the darkness that they're finding themselves in. Scott, talk about just what are some of the strategies that you had to learn, that you've had to implement, that you've had to keep and really fight to keep, because strategies are hard. You have to be a disciplined person. So talk a little bit about your journey out of the darkness and how that's gone.
Yeah, I mean, in 2007, the Cardinals sent me to a rehab facility. But like you said, I had the resources, but it wasn't like I was ready to give it up yet. Being a baseball player, it's like, I had this goal, I was going to do it. Being a musician, I had a goal to put out a CD, and have people listen to it. I did it. So for me to realize with, drugs and alcohol, I just said, okay, I'm not going to do it. I can do it. I can do it on my own. I'm strong. I just got to decide to do it. Well, it's not so easy with drugs and alcohol. You really have to say, you're powerless once you take that first drink. And, I never had a problem with it, but once I got into it where it became a routine, it was so hard to get out. And, I ended up going to rehab, I think 11 times in 10 years. And I had success during those times. And, I was re-engaging with churches. I never really had that strong hold. And then finally, I in Ottawa, I started getting this foothold with a Crossbridge Community Church out there, and
Awesome.
And I just saw the Pastor Kevin yesterday, and but I still was in a relationship that wasn't a good relationship to be in, and what I ended up having to do is just, I think I was like codependent on women. I always needed somebody around me, and to be in a relationship. And I had to realize, what, instead of going out and trying to find a girlfriend or a wife or whatever, I'm okay with it. I focused on my family, on God first, and then my family and my kids, and good friends. And if God brings a wife into my life later, that's on His terms. I'm okay with it. I'm laser focused on God and my family right now. And I think that's the biggest thing. I went to AA meetings. I went to all rehabs. I'm trying to remember the one they used to have. There's a faith-based AA group too that was out at church, but it's been like 3 years that they haven't had it. But in any case, the thing that's really got me is back on track, is putting blinders up to the people, the dark figures that were in my life in the past, right, and really bringing in faith-based people that want what's best for me as a person, and surround me with love. And Morris has been just a wonderful place to do that. I don't know if I could have done the same thing out in LA or anywhere else. And it's just now I go to the Village Christian Church in Manuka, and I still am involved in if somebody calls me up and says there's something going on, Eric Davey in town and Chris Borgstrom invited me to go to Fishers of Men, which is a Catholic men's group meeting. And we sit and pray and then we have confession, and then we just have a speaker and they talk, and then
That's
there's
awesome.
spaghetti and meatballs. So hey, if somebody's talking about God,
I'm there.
I'm
That's awesome.
I'm there, and there's just a lot of people in this area. When you look for the people, and the biggest thing is I had to get over like punishing myself. I was I felt horrible. I didn't want to face people. I felt like unworthy, and when I kept going up to Pastor Kevin in Ottawa, and I kept going up to the altar call and to pray. And he came over. He goes, "You're just going to keep coming until it works, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just going to keep praying and keep battling." And that never give up attitude with God. Anything can happen with Him. And I had to forgive myself because God had already forgiven me.
Right.
And when you turn away from that sin, it's amazing how quickly things can come back in your life. The relationship with my kids was not great for a while. I mean, they always loved me and they always happy to see me, but they were concerned, and they were unsure if they were safe in some cases with me. And so when you turn away from the sin and you go back, it's the prodigal son, and it was the same with God, with my dad, and with my kids and my hometown. They welcome me back with open arms, and I'm never going to go back to that situation. God's just blessed me with a second chance, a new lease on life, and I don't have the cars and the money like I used to, but I'm totally okay with that because what I have is greater than any material thing. So
I love it. You got soybeans. So
I do
there's
that.
Yeah.
I
which is something.
I do.
You've got edamame. Hey,
right.
Just a couple things that race through my mind. Scott, you're just a delightful human being. One of the things I always appreciated about growing up in Morris, and we all rubbed shoulders in Morris. Everybody kind of knew everybody. One of the stories I love to tell is that when I walked into Morris High School, Robert Shody, the principal, looked at me and he asked me, "Are you the last Seidler?" After my brothers in particular, who I love, by the way, but they did leave a legacy there that Robert Shody remembered. And I said, and I was a little guy, and I said, "Yeah, I am, Mr. Shody." And the look of relief on his face, like, thank God the Seidlers are done here until my own nephews got there. But a couple things I remember. First of all, for all of us, our story is our entire life. And no single part of our story defines the totality of who we are. And Scott, that's what I always celebrate. I'm glad you're back home in Morris. And even if you weren't, I'd still celebrate that with you. And I say that to countless church members as I counsel them as well. Man, you're going through a really dark spot right now. You just need to know that while this is all encompassing for your mind and heart, it is not the totality of your identity. I think as Christians, one of the biggest mistakes we make in Christian ministry is to get so fixated on a particular aspect of a person that we forget that there's a whole history. This person is larger than all these little things we narrow them down to be, including their addiction or the darkest days that they've walked through, or that they've been through a divorce twice, or whatever else it is. And Scott, the joy is that just talking with you, and I know especially folks from our hometown watch this video, this podcast, they're going to say, well, of course, Scott Spiezio was more than his baseball career. We knew him back when, and we knew him after. And that's a great thing. Second thing I want to share just real quick, and we're going to throw this up on the screen, is a book that we're using here at Shepard of the Desert. That's about the very thing we were just talking about, and that is the strategies to initiate change in your life. It's a book called Change Anything by a man named Kerry Patterson. And it confronts head on this fact that you can have the greatest desire in your life to change, the shame that you feel about whatever it is that is necessitating change to happen, that shame can only be overcome when you actually have the personal skills, maybe through rehab, maybe through just reading or sheer effort. You've got the sociology, the social network around you that actually wants to succeed, your change to succeed. And then finally, as Scott has done, sometimes you just got to make a structural adjustment to your life. And that may mean I'm going to leave the big city. I'm going to leave the cars and all the, accoutrements of professional athletic success behind. And I'm going to go structurally into a different place where I know that people are looking out for me because they love me for who I was and who I can be, not for a moment in time that maybe gets snapshotted across the St. Louis Post-Dispatch or in some other, news outlet. Scott, I'm just so thankful for you. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are blessed through this conversation. And I pray, and I know you're the same, that whoever you are, wherever you're at, that you will find a home to anchor you. And if that home is not a physical residence that has a zip code, maybe it's a home church with a pastor, a congregation that can wrap their arms of prayer around you and help you effect the change that needs to happen in your life. Scott, thanks so much for joining me today. Love you, brother. Wish you well.
Love you too.
And say hi to everybody in Morris as you have the opportunity. We'll look forward to seeing you soon, all right?
Hey, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you, Scott. Great talking with you. Amazing to catch up.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And thanks for watching this episode of the Shepard Podcast. I look forward to seeing you again soon.